the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Get a little stronger today, shall we? Welcome into the early edition, the new early time. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Thanks for joining us now, 8 to 10 every Monday through Friday. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, the video stream. You can catch us audio only live on Podbean, and then you can always get the podcast later in the day. And now you can do it 2 extra hours later in the day, moving this thing up a little bit and getting after it on a Monday morning after the U.S. Open, a really, really good U.S. Open, I thought. And really appreciate you guys being a part of the program. When you are on with us and interacting live, it just makes this show that much better. Like Jason, Anthony, and Craig starting us off this morning. Appreciate you guys checking out the YouTube live stream there and commenting as we go. And what'd you think of the U.S. Open? To me, a bit anticlimactic to finish. I thought Will Zalatoris had made that putt on 18. I was hoping to see Zalatoris, Matt Fitzpatrick, who obviously ended up being the winner, and Scottie Scheffler. Would have loved to seen them in a 3-man sudden death playoff. Actually, it's not sudden death at the U.S. Open, right? A 3-man playoff would have been fantastic with those guys because you get kind of everything there. You got the world's number one, who just seems to be dominating these days, in Scottie Scheffler. You got a guy who's never won a tournament, Will Zalatoris, but has been there multiple majors now. And then a guy in Matt Fitzpatrick. You could cast him as the villain at the U.S. Open, being from England. Also a guy who's never won a major tournament over here outside, if you want to call it the U.S. Amateur. Was it 9 years ago? A major tournament victory. I guess I wouldn't have a big problem with that. But, man, that would have made it that much better. That's just me getting greedy, though, I think, when we're talking about the U.S. Open, because the scene in Boston, fantastic. Craig says Zalatoris' putt on 18 looked good the whole way. It absolutely did. And he's that guy, too, that seemingly the moments aren't too big for him, man. That would have been pretty legendary to birdie such a difficult hole in that circumstance, knowing you needed it to get to extra holes. Unfortunately, it didn't happen by what? Half an inch, an inch max. So close. But a good representation, I think, of the entire weekend and what that thing was up in Brookline, the country club, and all the history that was involved in the whole deal. But this year was different, right? With the Live Series guys being over there. Dustin Johnson, the best of the group, not surprisingly. It wasn't a pretty group. 24th is what Dustin ended up finishing, tied for 24th at 4 over. And Patrick Reed, Bryson DeChambeau make the cut, but never involved seriously in contention. 10 over, 13 over for those guys. Richard Bland, the only other guy off the Live Series to make the cut. So just 4 guys. Mickelson didn't play well. Interesting next chapter in the golf drama, right? Matt Fitzpatrick, by the way, seems like a hard guy not to like. Handled everything with class and doing it, I think, about as well as you can do it, handling everything. And 17 out of 18 greens or something crazy on Sunday? No. How well he played. And out of the fairway bunker, and then afterwards was asked about it. The fairway made a massive mistake on 18 off the tee, right? All you got to do is miss right, and he pulls it left into a fairway bunker, and it looks like little mound right in front of him. He's going to have to play around it, play a little cut in the green. And he said afterwards that the one shot he's really struggled with this year, fairway bunkers. And man, he's stuck. Just couldn't have been much better and allowed him to get par and tap in to win the U.S. Open, or watch Will Zalatoris' putt slide by to win the U.S. Open, and his caddy immediately puts the hat over the head. So emotional. You see the family emotion in the background as well. Hard not to pull for that guy. But at the U.S. Open, I don't particularly want a guy not from the U.S. winning that thing. And I thought the emotions of the weekend, really the story of the weekend for me as I sit here on Monday morning, and we'll get into more of that as we roll on this morning. First, wanted to give you more of a general overview of the weekend, especially you're just getting up, getting going. That's kind of what this show can be for sure. Coming at things from the South Carolina perspective. U.S. Open kind of trumped anything that I saw over the weekend, but Gamecock football and will always be a massive topic on this show. And the latest in recruiting as we sit here in the middle, I guess getting towards the home stretch of June. Class 2023 now up to 8 commits for Carolina. A big-time athlete, let's say, out of the state of Alabama. The latest public commitment, I think, for Carolina. Give you some details on him. Cameron Sandland is his name. Plays quarterback in high school in Anniston, Alabama, but going to be a tight end, projected as a tight end in college. 3-star kind of guy, at least for one recruiting services. I think relatively under the radar, but making his commitment public most recently, and it has been a flurry of commitments here. I think it was about this time last week, maybe 10 days ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. The class had one player, and a lot like last year, even though last year was coming off of the COVID stuff and the first time that Shane Beamer and company could even bring people on campus. So we expected a flurry of stuff coming in last year. We're seeing it again this year. And now up to 8 commits, and Carolina up to 31 is what I'm seeing. The Gamecocks up to 31 in the country. The on3.com team rankings that takes a bunch of different services and combines them all in there. I think it's the best one to look at for comparison's sake, even though everybody's kind of on their own timeline, right? And another big-time prospect is Dylan Lonergan, the big-time quarterback, state of Georgia, set to make his commitment July 5th. Going to go visit Stanford. It's already checked out Carolina. It seems like it's going to come down to those two programs. Alabama, though, trying to get in the mix late in that thing. I know a lot of Gamecock fans really pulling for Dylan Lonergan to be the next Carolina commit, and to also help some others, maybe help others who might be on the fence say, hey, come join the class. Apparently, it was a handful of guys who were visiting recently who committed to the program kind of behind closed doors and then have made the news public at their own pace here, or that's at least the way that I read this thing for Carolina football. So Shane Beamer doing what Shane Beamer got hired to do, competing in recruiting, continuing the positive momentum around the program after the 7-6 season, coming off of just 2 wins at the end of the Will Muschamp era. Gamecock football and recruiting in June. I guess with the way that the calendar works these days, this is going to continue to be a trend, it looks like. You got camp season rolling in as well, so it's not just about 2023. It's also about even further down the line. But with the transfer portal now and everything involved there, I feel like it's almost a day-to-day kind of feeling out process with football recruiting, but across the board. College baseball, Oklahoma in the driver's seat. You see that game last night? Oklahoma, Notre Dame. Oklahoma ends up winning that thing. First play of the game, first baseman foul pop down the right field line, or first base line, I should say, in between first and catcher, and he comes flying in, catches that thing, goes flying over the railing, looks like he lands on his head, pops up, good to go. There's a couple of crazy things in that game. Crazy play at third base a little later where a slide pops the ball out of a glove. The ball goes shooting off the third base coach for Oklahoma. The runner, Oklahoma, just thought he was out, never saw the ball shoot away. So he just kind of looks like he's about to walk back to the dugout. Notre Dame guy scoops up the ball, tags him out. Craziest thing, one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Almost, that wasn't even the craziest thing in the game. Home run, Notre Dame hits to kind of make it more of a game later on. Out in left field in the bullpen for Oklahoma. Just so happens in Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure it was a relief pitcher, just opens the door coming back into the bullpen from using the facilities, I'm guessing. Bang, ball pops. The home run ball right at that door, bounces right to him. Almost scared the guy to death. So that's how I'm seeing the weekend as a whole. Today we got an elimination game. Auburn trying to stick around, not go 2-Q like Texas. Texas the only team out. We're down to 7 now in college baseball. Texas A&M eliminating Texas, and I'm sure just loving it yesterday. Sure, Texas A&M fans will hold that one over the Longhorns for a long time. But today it's Auburn and Stanford. Stanford, the number 2 overall seed. Auburn, number 14. They lost out in the all-SEC matchup to Ole Miss, who continues to roll, and they'll have another all-SEC matchup tonight in the winner's bracket, Ole Miss and Arkansas. So the winner of that one will pair up, or will be on a similar path, I should say, on their side of the bracket as Oklahoma is now. Doing it with a couple of wins, 2-0. You go 2-0 in Omaha, and you're in really, really good shape to get to that national championship series. Just one more win for Oklahoma will do it. It'll take a couple of more for either Ole Miss or Arkansas, assuming that Auburn and Stanford don't fight their way back through the losers bracket. So good start, I think, to the College World Series. Good crowd, some good games, some good moments. Again, from our perspective, a bummer of a postseason without Carolina and Clemson involved, with Coastal Carolina just missing out in that regional round. But name brands and good baseball. Oklahoma playing an aggressive style of baseball, stealing bases, athletic, young in college baseball, which is nearly unfathomable these days with the transfer portal, the extra year with COVID concerns, and so many teams just kind of older, experienced, good, and Oklahoma bucking the trend and on the precipice there of playing for the national title with one more win. But man, sometimes that one win can be very difficult. Now you get to hang out in the driver's seat today and play again tomorrow. We'll see if anybody can get some momentum going through the losers bracket on that side. And then we'll also see, obviously, one of the SEC teams will be in the driver's seat on the other side of the bracket, Ole Miss or Arkansas. Both those teams, plenty of experience and plenty of weapons as well. The Ole Miss story is a difficult one to pull against, eking their way into the tournament as a number 3 seed in the regional, and then just pretty dominant since. Wouldn't surprise me if they go on and win relatively easily tonight, but tough to bet against Arkansas and Dave Van Horn and everything he's done at the College World Series as well. And speaking of baseball, I got a little bit of you might notice the voice is a little throatier than usual. Got to go to the tissue here and blow the nose for a second as well. Long weekend on the baseball field for me. There might be an extra pause or two in today's show. My apologies for that. But coming off of Coach Pitch All-Star Stick Tournament weekend up in Greenville, Taylor's to be exact, where Northwood, they went to the Little League World Series. What was it, 2015, 2017? I forget what it was, somewhere in there, 5-7 years ago. And they continue to have quite the Little League program intact, even for 7- and 8-year-olds, which is what I got to see. And man, it was really cool to be a part of that weekend for multiple reasons. Let me start with some familiar faces I ran into. Brian Jeffcoat, former Gamecock buddy that done a lot of radio with through the years. He's got a 6-year-old that was almost involved in that thing. Not quite, but out there supporting a mid-Carolina team that lost out to Northwoods in the championship there and really, really good. Oh, they gave a whooping to my team on the way on our way out of the tournament. But he's not the only just familiar face I ran into. It was Jay Brown, who was running the Irmo team out there, former Gamecock pitcher as well, part of that 2010 national championship team. Then a guy that helped coach in high school 25 years ago ish is when I first met him. I think it was in 8th grade when I first met him 25 years ago. Brady Mashak is his name. Ended up playing at the Citadel, and I saw the Mashak name on a couple of jerseys there, a couple of kids running around, and I ran into him. It was awesome to see a guy who I met. Man, how old are you in 8th grade? 14 years old now. I think he's got one almost that age. Crazy to see. Felt old for sure, but so fun watching this thing in the grassroots level at that age. And it's not perfect. There's no doubt about it. Not perfect at all. There's parent coach drama, always drama, right? There was weather issues. Maybe could have been handled differently. There's always how a tournament is run and teams adjusting one way or another. Parents have specific gripes with the way that it's run. And yeah, not perfect at all. Don't get me wrong. But on a Father's Day weekend, to be on a baseball field with my 7-year-old and spending it with my family at a base, that's our first real kind of organized tournament away from home, representing our little town of TK, South Carolina. And it was awesome. Awesome weekend overall, emotional weekend overall. So our little team hadn't won a game going into yesterday, and it's a back and forth game with the Florence team going down to the last inning, and we got 2 outs, down a run, and I'm coaching third base, and I have never in my life at 44 years old been more nervous in a sports setting, because all I can do is screw it up as a third base coach, right? I got no control over a kid hitting it or not. All I can do is send one home and get them thrown out, lose the game. That's what I was envisioning. Fortunately for our little team, we came through. My son got to experience a win at the tournament, and there were a lot of ugly losses as well. 5 games they played, and 4 of them didn't go the extent of what you could do. You had the mercy rule going, but the one shining moment for a coach pitch team that I got to be a part of was cool, and certainly I think that's what you want, right? In sports all the time, we hear about it. You got to have a payoff. I remember Will Muschamp talking about it, right? That's how he handled any of the positive stuff. Yeah, you want to see some positive reinforcement for all the blood, sweat, and tears that go into it. Obviously, much different level and the whole thing, much different commitment level, but it had been something to be a part of for sure. Craig says it really is nerve-wracking coaching All-Stars. No doubt, man. No doubt. But also a blast. But I bring up the emotional sports weekend because I'm wondering where you guys are at with emotions in sport. And I mean this not just with my personal connection. And it was pretty cool before the first game yesterday. All the fathers came out on the field with their sons and taking the picture and the whole thing. And so to have that's the feel good part of the emotional sports weekend. And there's a great story out there. Ryan McGee did it about a poor father who lost his son and is dealing with the grief by playing catch every day with nearly anybody who will play catch with him. And that's the way that he's dealing with the grief of losing his son. Recommend you go check that one out there. It's all over social media, not too hard to find. But Ryan McGee did that one. So that's another kind of Father's Day tie to sports and emotion on the opposite end of the spectrum that I was on. But I feel like maybe right in the middle of that, golfer named Grayson Murray. You guys see him over the weekend? Grayson Murray, the one that I saw first to make me think about this topic a little bit more was I think it might be something that everyone who's ever played golf has done. Not happy with your putter? Take your putter as you're walking off the green and you just tomahawk throw that sucker. He did it at the US Open. Now, it was up a hill, right? Nobody was close by. And I think he ended up tweeting afterwards, like, I'm not going to apologize for being emotional. I'm an emotional guy. But I didn't see the one earlier where he ended up snapping a club over his knee. And then I'm seeing Rory McIlroy, who had a good weekend, was right there on the leaderboard. I think he finished top 5. But he hits out of the thick rough near a sand trap, right? Was just trying to pop it out of the thick rough and get back into the fairway, back into play, and it catches the corner of the fairway bunker right in front of him. And so he gets back in the sand and takes another couple of chops at the sand just to get his frustration out. To me, it's nearly impossible to have a problem with that, right? Obviously, you would prefer, I guess, in an ideal world to have control of your emotions and not have to show it negatively like that. But smashing the sand a little bit after a shot isn't hurting anything. The old tomahawk throw of the putter, I think, is a little bit different. That one is, I think if you see that at any point, even though, again, I've been guilty of it before, it is just what you want to do. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just being a human. Maybe it's being a male. I don't know what it is, but there is something that just feels right about taking that something that has a little weight to it and chucking it out of frustration if it's just going that way. And obviously, the U.S. Open is designed for that. That's what it is. Meredith Taylor, our golf analyst on the program, former Gamecock golfer, scratch golfer, said she thought -5 was going to win this thing. -6 won it. Sometimes we've seen plus numbers win the U.S. Open in the past years. Like, that's how they set it up. And it can be frustrating for me, a guy who's not very good at golf, because I want to see great golf shots. I think it's just simpler for me to appreciate great golf shots if they're making birdies and going under par a bunch, as opposed to making par saves or hanging around even par, just a few under. But for a really good golfer like Meredith, she says she loves the U.S. Open just because it is so tough. And maybe to see those other guys struggle like most of us struggle in golf is fun for her. And I told her it's kind of sick. But I get it. I appreciate it. And I think a lot of us do as well. And it made me think, like, that is what I think most of us are attached to a lot of times when it comes to sports, one way or another, right? We're attached to either we get in that cycle of complaining about our teams and feeling sorry for ourselves and the pity party and just being used to that if the team's not very good. Or we hate watching someone getting that emotion out if we don't like their mannerisms or how they handle certain things. If maybe they are ultra emotional. I was just thinking about emotional outbursts in the history of sports. What's your number one? What comes to mind when I say an emotional moment in sports? Maybe that says more about us than anything else. Because the number one thing that pops in my head when I hear that is Bobby Knight chucking the chair across the basketball court back in the 80s, I believe it was. John McEnroe yelling, "Are you serious?" and throwing his temper tantrums. I think I might have been about the same age when those things happened. Maybe that's why they just stuck with me. Very kind of formative, childish-like behavior that I didn't expect or just really stuck with me. Craig's in on the McEnroe thing. Because I'm wondering maybe why that sticks with us more, the negative part, than the positive one that I think of immediately is Michael Jordan just breaking down in tears with the first championship trophy not too long. I guess, yeah, and with his father there. I mean, just almost in the fetal position, cradling the championship trophy that he had to battle through the Detroit Pistons to get, and how much that meant to him and the whole thing. But they're not a lot of other just massive positive emotional outbursts that stick in my memory, not nearly as much as those other ones, the negative ones. And that putter chuck by Grayson Murray was just so perfect in so many ways. Maybe that's what it is about the sports part of that, is that you can't do anything like that, or I guess you could, but you can't do something like that at a normal job in a normal profession and not have repercussions. That you're going to get something in your file, you're going to get suspended, you're going to get fired, whatever it is. Sports is different. It's the worst analogy. I always hate it. Just absolutely, I cringe when people say, well, if I did that at my job and apply it to like the NFL, which has no bearing in reality, has next to nothing to do with cubicle jobs or the whole thing. Yeah, it's a profession, but it ain't like your profession in so many ways. So let's not try to think it's apples to apples when something comes up. Like if I did that at my job, like I guess the one thing that I think of in my mind was Tom Brady getting after his offensive coordinator through the years, Josh McDaniels, whoever it may be, like just the way they interact is not typically how people react in the professional world, at least not in my experience. And Hope, good morning to you. Thanks for popping us on here on the YouTube live stream. A little bit earlier than usual. Going to continue to do things 8 to 10, by the way, on the live stream. But I was just saying the emotion of the weekend in so many ways, all over the spectrum. And maybe that's what we get attached to, because you get to see crazy play, like a guy going head over heels in Oklahoma in the College World Series in the first out of the game. And the celebration, and almost like did you see that surprise of it all? A couple of other moments like that in that game last night to play at third, that home run, the guy coming out of the door in the outfield bullpen, crazy. But the U.S. Open can bring out the absolute worst in golfers for sure. And I think it did. That Rory McIlroy example in the fairway bunker, just smashing the sand. But wouldn't that be great if every job, not even every job, right? Every classroom, maybe, every setting that we go through in our lives had something like that, had that alternative to just go work out the negative emotions real quick. You had a little bunker everywhere with an iron beside it. You just go smash it a few times. I guess it's part of those smash rooms. I don't think that's a thing anymore. I know that was a bit of a fad for a while. Just go and pay some money, go into a room, just smash it up. It'd be awesome if your job had one of those areas. You could go just have some golf clubs, and maybe that's what the relatively new trend of throwing the axes is all about. But you can't. I guess you can. You can. I've done it before. You can take out a little anger there, but to me, I'm so worried about hurting myself, and certainly don't want to hurt anybody else. I treat it more like darts, just a little timid doing it. Get more and more confident, I guess, and it might also depend on what else is going on with the night. But if we could get some sort of we call that the hate trap. I don't know what we call that. The adult sandbox, where you could just take out some frustration like Rory McIlroy did. That would be fantastic. I think workplaces would be better for it. I know schools would be better for it, right? Just send them to the old, almost like the penalty box, just to work it out. You go work it out for 2 minutes. Work it out with the golf club in the sand. I think that everybody would feel better about it. So 30 minutes into the new time slot here. I know Gamecock fans, I think Gamecock fans are feeling better about the kind of the state of the program. And maybe it's complete trust, and I'm over dramatizing where things are in recruiting for Shane Beamer in the class of 2023. Or maybe I'm applying an older standard to where guys were committing before June or just more long-term commits, but it makes sense with just a second-year staff, right? Where there's not a ton of long-standing relationships through the years where that coaching staff has been attached to the school. I think Shane Beamer's obviously known. He made his reputation as a recruiter, and specifically running South Carolina's recruiting operation for Steve Spurrier right before the heyday, right? Leaving the day that Jadeveon Clowney signed is how Shane Beamer left the South Carolina program. You can't leave a program much better than that. Number one overall recruit, a generational talent like Jadeveon Clowney, but a ton of other guys that were stacked with him. So clearly Shane Beamer has the track record. Gamecock fans counting on him to now make that his own as the head coach. And he did it with the transfer portal already for this year. But these class of 2023 recruits from high school aren't about the 2022 season, obviously, won't be eligible at all. But even the 2023 season need to have probably a couple of impact guys out of high school, ideally, that are that talented to come in and have an immediate impact as a true freshman, but those are few and far between. This is about building the foundation of your program, getting the right guys in, having the right fit for your culture and the welcome home mentality, the culture of competition. And I think that's what these 8 guys are right now. That's what Shane Beamer is hoping these guys are. That's what this football staff is banking on, that these guys are going to be some foundational pieces. But with the way that the transfer portal is going now, with name, image, and likeness and all that stuff going on, who knows how much recruiting is going to continue to change, the possibility of no limits for classes and the whole thing. It's a strange time for recruiting in a lot of ways, but you still got to keep doing it, and you got to add pieces. And the latest one is a really interesting one. I don't know if I remember this type of background. Maybe I go back to, it has happened, right? You get really athletic big guys who in high school you play them everywhere. You get them the ball in their hand as much as possible, right? I mentioned Jadeveon Clowney. I saw him as a running back at South Point in his senior year, and it was just frightening. I remember I actually had a buddy, Jason Harrell, that played a little bit of high school football, I think, early on in high school, or tried to play, and it was Julius Peppers who was nearby. And Peppers was also, they gave him the ball in high school, and he's like, I'm done with that. That is nightmarish when you see a guy that big, that strong, that fast coming at you. And that, just me as a camera nerd back in the day, being a TV guy trying to get highlights at Jadeveon Clowney's game, having him run the ball my way. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Like, that was a little intimidating, let's say. So ideally, you get amazing players out of high school like that. But with the way things are going, transfer portal-wise, the safer bet is to get more proven players from other college programs. And the mix and the match, what you got to do with that moving forward is going to be fascinating. Jason says Zach Pickens ran the ball at running back as well. Scary. Yeah, exactly. He helped his high school hand-to-hand up there go to the state championship as a 5-star defensive interior defensive lineman, basically what he has become for the Gamecock. But they also gave him the ball. Mark, you like riding off into the lunch sunset, LOL, sad about the new time? Sorry, Mark. I hear you. Maybe if the 2-year-old would be on better behavior at my house, we could keep the 10 to 12. Maybe we'll go back to 10 to 12. Who knows? But you also have the option of just starting up the show at your own personal time of 10 and listen to it to 12 and ride off into your lunch sunset, which I've never heard that phrase ever. I'd like to know how you do your lunches. You got a lunch sunset. But back to the recruiting part of this for the Gamecocks. Positive momentum continues. It appears that these recent visits that the Gamecocks have brought a bunch of guys in, clearly you're getting favorable responses, you're getting commits, you're getting some positive momentum for Shane Beamer. I think this is all a part of every college football program at this time of year. Let's be very clear about this, right? It's something that is absolutely mandatory when you're the head coach of South Carolina. And 31 right now is where Carolina ranks again with their 8 commits, according to on3.com and their composite rank. Well, you got to be up there. And I would argue you got to be better than that. And I'm sure Shane Beamer would probably concede that you need to have better recruiting numbers than that. You need to be top 25 to compete, because when you're 31 in the country, as I click on it right now, you guys want to guess what Carolina is ranked in the SEC? It was a little higher than I thought, actually. 9th. So because of who you play, and especially moving forward with Texas and Oklahoma coming to the league, and I think they'll go to that 3-6-6 model and add a conference game every year. You play 9 conference games and get everybody coming in every 2 years, or every 4 years, I should say. Every 2 years you're playing everybody in the league. There is no margin for error. You got to have the players. Again, not a recruiting guy necessarily every single day in the ins and outs of the drama that usually accompanies 16-year-olds, sometimes even younger than that, being courted, and then there's camps, and there's reaction here, and there's Hope says that's not terrible for a second-year coach. I feel the recruiting will get better. Talking about the recruiting rankings. Yeah, and again, it's really early on. 31 in the country, though. I think Will Muschamp consistently had better numbers than that. But also, we saw the struggles under Will Muschamp on game day with the offense consistently. That just seemed to become the program's identity, right? Could recruit some good players. And had those numbers kind of where they needed to be, couldn't get them to do what you needed them to do. So things, I think, trending up for the Gamecocks in a lot of ways, but we'll need to continue to do that. And those numbers need to continue to get better, need to continue positive momentum in the whole thing. And again, the big question mark is, how does the game change overall for college football recruiting moving forward with possible rules changes and the whole thing? So glad you're a part of the program. One thing they've added to the show recently is throwing in some snippets of former shows. If you guys haven't heard this story from Stuart Lake, great time to do it during the College World Series as well. I think it's certainly worth your time. We'll pop it on here for just a second as take just a small break. Again, struggling with, I think, a bit of a cold and the coach voice of yelling all weekend at a Coach Pitch All-Star tournament. And maybe that's why I appreciate Stuart Lake's story here about positioning outfielders that much more. Let you hear that. Be right back after this on Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent.
I'll tell you a good quick Ole Miss story, and his son reminded me of it. Coach Bianco got mad at me one year because you move the outfielders by pointing or doing like this, and he said they couldn't see me. You got to stand out more. You got to be obvious. So I come back the next day, and there was a wall between us in the dugout at Ole Miss. He couldn't see me, and I knew he couldn't. So I bring a huge John Cena foam hand, because when I go to wrestling, I like to buy foam hands. You'll know that, just for the record. So I bring it, and I'm moving the outfielders with this big, huge foam hand. The outfielders are laughing, the crowd's going. And he comes around the corner and goes, hey, you're doing a much better job today moving them. And I go, oh, thank you. And he had no idea till the game ended. A reporter just jokingly said, hey, the team seemed loose, and Coach Lake had this huge foam hand in the duck. So for the rest of the year, you'll love this. Motley Crue came through Memphis. So, of course, me and Coach McDonald, our wives go. I get a nice big Motley Crue foam hand. So for the rest of the year, we'd move the outfielders with our foam hand. So when his son started the boombox, Drew texted me. He goes, Coach, I remember your shenanigans, all your stuff in the dugout, man. I thought it would help us get loose. And that's when LSU, he said, that's when we became who we were this year. They got the new coach. We were all trying to be so, uptight. And all of a sudden, we just became LSU. And who cares? Let's have fun. We got a good team, but, we're not going to win this thing. And that one's just so cool to me to see that matchup maybe setting up.
Fantastic story. Good stuff. And it reminds me of what I saw on the field up in Greenville, Taylor, South Carolina over the weekend, and how you get so many mixed messages as a kid. I just try to put myself, especially having a 7-year-old playing baseball now, and I got a 9-year-old playing a bunch of sports too. Try to put myself in their position and try to hear it through their ears. And I think it's hilarious so many times, or dads usually, but us adults who are coaching try to say the right things, but so many times we're just saying it the wrong ways. But my favorite in sports is coaches on the sideline screaming, "Relax!" Like these ultra intense competitive coaches, where winning that game is the only thing on their mind in so many ways, and they've already dedicated so much time in their lives to revolve around in so many ways. So I get how you're attached to it, but how you can't see the hilarious irony of just screaming, "Relax!" And the one that uh, I saw firsthand this weekend is just how the umpires give you a spiel about how kids are supposed to smile and it's all about them having fun and the whole thing, and then umpires make bad calls and then sometimes don't handle it the best way themselves. It is impossible for anybody to have fun sometimes. But to see coaches just yelling at kids, "We gotta have some fun," and then if there's a mistake anywhere, that is not how it's getting handled. Right? There's no way you can have fun. So that just dawned on me with the Stuart Lake story. Great stuff from Stuart, and we'll get him in later this week as well. Hopefully with his college baseball take on the College World Series right now. Good place maybe to restart this thing. And thanks for joining us. The new moved up time, earlier time here on the program. This is where we're going to keep things at least for the foreseeable future, 8 to 10 every day. The live stream on video on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and on audio on Podbean, and then all the podcast platforms will have it right after we're done. Oklahoma is in the driver's seat there. And again, doing it differently than most college baseball programs right now. Freshmen and sophomores starring for them and stealing bases just seem to be playing as loose and free as possible, which is kind of maybe how we reverse engineer the storyline after things go well. But that's what's happening for Oklahoma. One win away from the National Championship Series out there in Omaha. Got the win against Notre Dame last night. Notre Dame and Texas A&M sending Texas home as the first school eliminated. 2-2 for the Longhorns. I don't think anybody in college baseball outside of Texas fans feel bad for Texas. I think it was their 37th, 38th trip, whatever it is, something ridiculous, out to Omaha, but it turned out to be a short one. And you guys seen what One Bar has done? Social media featuring this, at least on my timeline on Twitter, the Jello shot count, having a competition between fans. Brilliant by this bar out in Omaha. And I think they've done this for a while because I seem to recall the establishment that keeps the scoreboard there. It's brilliant. Why wouldn't you do that? Get fans to compete, to basically pay you money. Fantastic marketing. And I think Arkansas at last check might have been in the league. I saw a video of Woo Big Suey going in the bar and the whole thing. Brilliant. But Arkansas and Ole Miss in the winner's bracket game tonight, the all SEC affair. The winner of this one will be like Oklahoma in the driver's seat on the other side of the bracket, though. Looks like headed for the national championship series, but we'll see. You never quite know, especially when you got Auburn and Stanford, a couple of hosts in the regional round, and Stanford all the way up to number 2 national seed. Plenty deep, plenty talented. So it will not be a cakewalk for whoever wins tonight on that side of the bracket, because you're going to have to go through maybe one of these teams again, or maybe the same team you play again tonight. But has been a solid start to the College World Series for sure. In that first play in last night's game, the Oklahoma Notre Dame deal, foul ball, kid going head over heels, right over the top of it, into the dugout, just sums up the College World Series to me. On the golf course, good U.S. Open, competitive U.S. Open, pretty dramatic finish to the U.S. Open. Matt Fitzpatrick getting his first major win, doing it as an Englishman to kind of put a damper maybe on the waving of the red, white, and blue up in Boston. Not necessarily a guy you can really love, I think. I mean, he was just so good yesterday. So methodical, so patient was the word he used, I think, to describe it afterwards. No one starts rallying a fan club behind someone saying, yes, this guy is so patient. We love him. And the U.S. Open especially, and maybe more so because of the Live Series, having more international guys. I say more international guys, but the recent entries of DeChambeau and Reed, Mickelson, and Dustin Johnson, Taylor Gooch, another American guy. Maybe it's not more international guys, but the international influence of that Live Series, let's say, trying to challenge what and I perceive as the American tour, the PGA Tour. Obviously, it's not just American. And you got a guy like John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, those guys not being from America, but maybe being some of, not maybe, certainly being some of the loudest advocates right now for the PGA Tour. Just has brought up a new kind of alliance in golf. You're on one side or the other. And I oversimplify it by calling it international. You're part of the Live Series alliance. And if not, you're part of the PGA Tour. That's not as simple as it goes. But watching Matt Fitzpatrick, guy, what, only Jack Nicklaus, or was it Arnold Palmer? I forget which one, has won at the same course, the U.S. Amateur and now the U.S. Open. Great. And to have a guy like Will Zalatoris right there, young guy, easy to pull for, I think, because it's a pretty exciting golfer and not afraid to show some emotion, and cool last name, young guy. Not a traditional golfer build, I think is the way to put that. Maybe just really skinny dude. Looks a lot more like Adam Sandler's caddy there and Billy Madison back in the day. No, Happy Gilmore, what I'm looking for, not Billy Madison. Apologies. But who has now been there in multiple majors, right there. And almost seems like the new version of Brooks Koepka, a guy who just always did it in the majors for a stretch and wasn't necessarily relevant any other time. Well, Zalatoris hasn't won like Koepka, but he was right there and had a chance to force the playoff, and putt on 18, man, did look so good for so long and just missed it by an inch, half an inch, whatever it was. You got Scotty Scheffler as well, number 1 player in the world right there in the mix. So plenty of drama there at the U.S. Open in Boston. You had Keegan Bradley, the hometown guy, making a bit of a run too, involved, and kind of a unique setting, unique brand of fan that you get in Boston. Maybe get it Bethpage Black up in New York a little bit as well, just a different type of vibe on the golf course, I think, than a lot of other majors, especially. You're not going to get that type of vibe coming up at the British Open, but I bet it's going to be a good one. Just a slightly different type of deal. So the emotion there that was shown by his caddy, Matt Fitzpatrick, I'm talking about, that was you can't strip that, man, because that's a weird spot to be in. First of all, caddy's a weird spot to be in, right? Because you're celebrating being part of someone else's win that you didn't hit any shot. And who knows if you made the right calls? Obviously, you probably did. You can excuse the sniffles today and the pauses on the program. That's what the mute button is for. You might have to see it if you're watching the live stream. You don't have to hear it. But it's got to be a weird spot to be in. First of all, to be attached to a guy who hasn't won a major, knowing all the hard work, all the pressure, or maybe everything that could mean you're going to win that thing. Then he's already tapped in, has a one-shot lead, birdie putt on the 72nd hole there. If it goes in, then you're already it's your job to be prepared to continue to be the caddy and keep it going and compete at the highest level. And then all of a sudden it's just over. And it's just barely over, and your guy wins. And it was the only time I remember in golf that the caddy showed the winning emotion before the player, and it was like the player took on the role of the caddy there in Matt Fitzpatrick. It was almost like consoling him or celebrating with him or for him as much as he was celebrating for himself. So Fitzpatrick's a guy that seems to be very difficult to root against. His family's reaction in the background was a classic television shot that will probably be replayed a bunch. Like, they were going nuts in that putt miss. As well they should. But it was the caddy's reaction of just putting the hat down, the brim of the hat down, and almost like bursting into tears immediately, just tears of joy, obviously. But it's one of those things where you don't want to celebrate another person's miss too much. It's just not kosher, right? But that's the position they were in. It was unique. Something I don't know if I've ever seen before. And then this unique place we're in golf with the Live Series Challenge and those guys being in this major, not playing very well. Again, Dustin Johnson, the best finish out of those Live guys at 24th, ended up being 4 over. Patrick Reed and Bryson DeChambeau made the cut, but finished in double digits over par. Only one other Live Series golfer, Richard Bland, did make the cut. Phil Mickelson was 11 over, just tough to watch in his couple of rounds. Not overly surprising, but that's where golf is right now. And Matt Fitzpatrick takes it home. And I think it's in a good place overall for multiple reasons, kind of what we're talking about there. That you got the challenge, you got that drama, you got an excellent product, and we saw the competition in multiple ways, right? A young guy in Zalatoris hadn't won. Fitzpatrick, relatively young too, looking for major number one. Scotty Scheffler just recently won at the Masters, number one overall. Another young guy, easy to like, right there in the mix. So the emotion of winning, I touched on it. The opposite display of emotion that makes me smile the largest, and Grayson Murray leading that way, but Rory McIlroy also had his moment too, slamming his club in the sand a few times after he chunked one from the rough into the next fairway bunker. It was Murray who chucked the putter tomahawk style and ended up breaking a club too over his knee, I think, this weekend. So identifiable for those of us who played golf before, and the frustration, man. So frustrating. And, for these guys, can't imagine, first of all, being that good at golf. but then all the work, the individual hours that you got to put in. Dustin Johnson gets a bad rap about that as well. Like, he's just seemingly so talented that he has ascended that far in the golf world, and all the time that he's put in by himself and on the range and the roots there in Irmo. It's a good story not too long ago about that, trying to make sure to go back and talk to um, some of those who helped form him growing up. I think Josh Kendall did that on The Athletic, but just trying to be more accurate in the portrayal of Dustin Johnson, not just that he's just a freak athlete that is good at golf and doesn't try as hard as the other ones. But no, there's been plenty of dedication and time, energy, and the whole thing, focus, love of the game. There is that for him too. He just kind of plays a different type character in golf narrative usually. But I just mentioned that because golf's just different than every other sport. It's just on you, and it's so much between your ears, especially in these majors and these massive moments. And that's why it's really easy to like a guy like Will Zalatoris, who seemingly is unaffected by that, or maybe even is just better under those circumstances. Just continues to rise to the top, but hasn't gotten over the hump yet. So I was really pulling for him. Had nothing against Matt Fitzpatrick. Again, hard to pull against, but not being an American at the U.S. Open, I'll go for the American every time. Very simple. Scotty Scheffler, you've already won. You're good. You're number one in the world. How about this Zalatoris kid? Let's let him win. Let's see him finally push through and see then what he can become with that major title under his belt. That's all also part of it, right? Because what I saw over the weekend makes me think that Matt Fitzpatrick is not done winning majors. 17 out of 18 greens, Brookline, Sunday, U.S. Open. That's no fluke. That's no. Let's see, what are some of the random names I'm trying to think of? The PGA Championship winners. If I can come up with one. Maybe you guys can help me out in the comments there. Trying to think. There's definitely a couple. John Vandevelde is the one that comes to mind, even though he didn't win. And maybe it was that specific British Open where we had some guys. Yeah, Craig says Zalatoris could have already had 3 major wins. His time's coming. That's the thing, though, right? Nothing is guaranteed in golf. I agree. I want to see that happening, but that's the fear, right? I mean, 6 times Phil Mickelson finished second at the U.S. Open. That's another great line, another great stat, I should say, out there for the great Jack Nicklaus that was brought to my attention the one time I played golf with Steve Spurrier. Sitting on the tee, probably waiting to hit a shot or something in a scramble at the whole media event. He's like, "How many majors Jack Nicklaus win?" Sports nerds that were playing with him, like 18. Yeah, I think you guys know how many times he finished runner up. You know, 19. Crazy, a crazy stat. 37 top 2 finishes in majors for Jack Nicklaus career wise. So that's why I get where Craig's coming from. His time is coming for sure, but in this usual trajectory, I don't know if we're seeing that anymore. What you would think was a logical path to winning a major would be to win a few other events on the PGA Tour. But a guy like Koepka, Patrick there, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the thing with all the emphasis put on the majors. And now you got that Live Series involved a little bit. Don't know how that's going to affect things moving forward completely. If it de-emphasizes more tour events, if it can gain some momentum and maybe even pick up more players. But Patrick Reed and DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson are massive names in golf. I don't know how much it affects like the John Deere Open or something like that, but we'll see. Yeah, I'll be pulling for Zalatoris moving forward. He's one of those guys now that I think it becomes easier and easier to pull for when you watch a guy who doesn't back down and contends and just comes an inch, a half inch away, whatever that last putt was, to go into sudden death at the U.S. Open, and has been so close several times now. Sign me up for pulling for him hard in the next major. But the emotions on the other side of that thing, the Grayson Murray throwing the tomahawk putter and just watching guys having to deal with being put in tough spots, or that now that I think of it, is why those two guys that I mentioned, DeChambeau and Reed, why they are so difficult to pull for. DeChambeau specifically sticks out. He said it, and I'll paraphrase, but he said it before, like, yeah, just got some bad breaks, didn't play bad, but just the ball shouldn't have gone here, or you just see his reaction sometimes if the bounce doesn't go his way, and immediately my reaction to that is, "Oh, you're not being a baby. You're just handling that like a spoiled child." Maybe that's why the John McEnroe instance came up to me, talking about the emotional outburst in my head. Certainly, that was the way that Bobby Knight came off to me, and why that one sticks in my head too, the throwing the chair across the floor in a basketball game, and you're a grown man, and that's what you're doing. Crazy. But then we see Grayson Murray chucking a putter at the U.S. Open, breaking a club. See Rory McIlroy smashing the sand out of frustration. Easy to identify with that so many ways. And then the emotion of a different way. My buddy Brian Owens weighing in, bittersweet to have played on the road in All Stars, now coaching there, full circle, my friend. Yeah, in full circle in more than one way. Like my son played in All Stars and having done that growing up, but then getting to see other guys who I coach. I helped coach in high school. When I went to Carolina 25 years ago, Trey Dyson was there and led his team to the state championship, and another guy was in the program at the time. Brady Mashak mentioned seeing him over the weekend, part of that Northwood program outside of Greenville that is dominant, fantastic. But seeing his kids now, that's crazy to me. Having coached someone, then seeing their kids play, them coaching their kids, pretty nuts, pretty awesome. And seeing it firsthand, seeing everything that's involved in youth sports on a state tournament level where everybody wants to win and everyone thinks that their kid is set to be the next superstar, and only the coach might be getting in their way or the umpire might be getting in their way. I am encouraged about the kids moving forward. The parent situation. It'd be an interesting sociological study, because I think it's easy to say, like, it's the parents who've changed these days. But I remember when I was playing too, and I think there were parents acting about the same. I think parents and kids probably have never been ideal when it comes to dealing with adversity. Let's put it that way, right? Call goes against your team, always going to be some complaint. And maybe it's how those are expressed, or um, how frequently, how strongly those things get expressed. Maybe that's what's changed. I don't know. But yeah, there were some instances for sure. Calls go against the team. Parent reaction is strong right at the umpire and the whole thing, and that's sad to see for sure. It's sad to see because the kids see that and think that it's either okay, or maybe get scarred by that in some way. I don't know. But then to see dads with sons on Father's Day as part of this deal, and knowing what that is, I think, especially with baseball being what it has been from the major league level, losing numbers nationally from as far as TV audience, and really having been replaced a decade ago at least as the national pastime in our country by football. I think that can be a little bit overblown as well. There's still plenty of kids playing baseball and having some great moments. Being a part of the dugout at that age, I think, is so important in so many ways. Being a part of the team and being around their families, dads specifically over the Father's Day weekend. There's plenty to be encouraged about as well. It might just depend on how you want to look at it. But I was mentioning the study. It would be amazing to have footage, right, or to somehow be able to document how a coach pitch all-star tournament looked in 1982, let's say, versus what we just had over the weekend. That was just part of 40 years ago. Because you'd have to have some kind of unbiased footage or report. Otherwise, if you were just there, I know maybe if you're a bit more experienced and you say, "No, I was there and I saw it," well, you've also changed, right? Your perspective has now changed considerably, and that's what you gotta it's impossible to take into account and be anywhere close to objective because we're always changing and evolving in the whole thing. So the old easy man, kids these days and parents these days and things are going bad. I get how people come to that conclusion. I'm not ready to be there, and I'm certainly optimistic about what I saw personally over the weekend with baseball and the state tournament up in Greenville and then the US Open as well. Good to see a guy like Matt Fitzpatrick, kind of like a seems to be a good dude. Really good at golf, obviously. Won the US Amateur, same course almost a decade ago, I think it was. And comes back and wins it. And just that ball striking phrase now sticks out to me in golf. It's a great ball, one of the best ball striking performances ever. I think that's just what you do. I guess if you're really going to get into the X's and O's of golf, that's the term to use when you hit greens. Hit a bunch of greens, and he did it yesterday. 17 out of 18 is crazy. One of the best ever. And he deserved to win. That doesn't mean I have to come on here today and say, "Oh, I love watching Matt Fitzpatrick win." I wanted one of Will Zalatoris to win or Scotty Scheffler to win the U.S. Open specifically. And Fitzpatrick comes off as kind of a nice dude, but not necessarily a guy that I'm going to continue to pull for. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. Because to see that exchange of emotion after the win, that was unique. It was one of the most unique things I think I've seen, especially in major golf, to see the caddy kind of celebrate or react more emotionally than the player. And it was cool. It was exactly like the roles were reversed. But it was also an interesting spot they were in celebrating after a guy missed. And coming off as a someone doing it with class and good sportsmanship, which is exactly what they did come off as, but also celebrating winning the US Open, knowing the lives are just different now. We had that going on in golf. Got the College World Series you touched on a little bit ago, and from the Gamecock football perspective, again, if you're new to the show, this show is coming at the sports world from the South Carolina perspective first, and then kind of branching out from there with the U.S. Open being what the U.S. Open is. That's the story coming into today for sure. But Gamecock football, maybe 1B, just with the run of commits they've gotten recently in recruiting and knowing how important recruiting is to college football, how much we love college football, talking about it every single day in some way. and an athlete out of the state of Alabama, one of the most recent commits or most recent guy to go public anyway, guy who plays quarterback. Jarrell Adams is who he kind of reminds me of just on paper, looking at the measurables. I think this player from Alabama, Cameron Sandland is his name, might even be a little bit more physically developed. I read 6'4", 220. I don't think Jarrell Adams was quite that filled out at that point when he was leaving the state of South Carolina, one of the smaller schools, and played quarterback, played all over the place as well, if I recall correctly, but ended up being a tight end, obviously, for the Gamecocks, and that's where Sandlin projects as well. And then Adams going on to the NFL, New York Giants. But a rare quarterback now and going to be a tight end kind of deal. But the number is up to 8 in the class, and the class ranking is at 31 at last check, the on3.com team composite score there. Again, it's really easy to get bogged down in the details in sports or in recruiting specifically, right? I mean, the difference between the 28th class and the 31st class is crazy. They just do it mathematically in these composites. And they do it class score, so you can get up to 100 and averaging that would be the top recruit in the country. I think it's a score of 100. And then you go down from there, right? But as I check these out, the Gamecocks at 87.2 basically right now for this class of 2023. The top class, Notre Dame, is at 92.9, almost 93. They've got 15 guys, almost double the size. Alabama has half the size of the Carolina class right now at just 4, but they're ranked at number 5 in the country with a 91.5 basically composite score. Out of that 100 scale, Clemson right behind Alabama, and they got 12 guys committed to their class of 2023. Their 91.4 score. Texas A&M behind them. Tennessee up in the top 10. Georgia was up at number 3, scooted over them. Arkansas, LSU, 11 and 12. So the point from the South Carolina perspective in recruiting is you can't just be good nationally, because good nationally means you're probably at the bottom of the SEC. Right now, Carolina's 31 nationally and 9th in the SEC. And let me get that margin of error for Carolina. Ole Miss at 19 as I scroll through here nationally. But other SEC programs not too far behind Carolina. Florida is at 38 right now with Billy Napier taking over. They just have 6 guys. Mississippi State's at 37. A handful of spots, 6 spots behind Carolina. Kentucky's at 43. Kentucky's a great example, I think, of how we can overvalue recruiting rankings in a lot of ways. I feel like they've always been somewhere around there, maybe gotten up to a top 20 class here in the last several years. But obviously the program plays higher than their recruiting rank. Trying to think of another program like that out there. Boise State seems to be a good example out west, maybe. Wake Forest, another great example. As I look at them at number 48, 1 spot better than Vandy. Just what they've done on the field compared to what they're supposed to do on paper has been fantastic over the last several years. Now it's Shane Beamer's job to figure out the ideal recipe in this very fluid time of college football recruiting. All right, how much emphasis are you going to put in development? Which, talking to a guy like G.A. Mangus, who has been there as an assistant coach, as a recruiter for the Gamecocks, and then as a coach, mentioned that that's what South Carolina is. That's where the cut the gummy in half episode, the first time GA was on with us, that's what he was talking about. If you think you're going to just compile a class of a bunch of 5-star and 4-star guys at the University of South Carolina, you got to cut the gummy in half, he was saying. That it's just so difficult. And not to say that Shane Beamer can't get the program there at some point. I think we've seen Dabo Sweeney and Clemson basically do that exact thing, right? at first, in the first several years for sure, while you try to build the program up to that. You got to come up with the right recipe of maybe a guy who is not a high profile guy like now, like exactly who I was talking about, who projects to play in college at a different position in Cameron Sandlin. This is rated 3 stars by one services, not even rated by maybe a few others, just because plays quarterback but projects to be a tight end, a bit of an under the radar guy, a guy you got to develop. Well, you certainly do have to develop guys. Cam Smith, maybe a good example of a guy who has developed now, preseason All-American for Carolina. But he's a tough example because he came in as a high school All-American. Clearly struggled early on in his Carolina career. Didn't live up to that billing immediately. And to me, it, I mentioned it at the time, like, I don't know of a bunch of examples at corner, specifically a defensive back, where you come in and don't play well, but then develop into a really good player. I always go to the Stephon Gilmore example, and maybe that's just extreme because he's so talented, so good. How it took him 2 practices to be named starter, and Spurrier said, "Yeah, just can't have a guy come in and immediately be a starter in the first practice. That doesn't do much for team morale." But he didn't waste much time. I think it was second. It was obvious. It was that obvious that Stephon Gilmore was that good that early that he needed to be a first team guy at an SEC school like South Carolina. That's not the rule, but I feel like guys typically 4-star high school All-Americans at that position, they say it's easier to get on the field and have an impact the farther away you are from the ball. The closer you are to the ball, the more you have to learn a lot of times, the more you have to know more intricacies, I think is how it's been put to me, of what exactly the coaches, that system demands of you. I think when you're talking about it from the defensive line perspective, especially the interior guys, a lot of times out of high school, the more they have to physically develop. Certainly, it's the other way on the offensive line too. I mean, you're a massive human being if you get recruited by an SEC school like South Carolina on either side of the line. But being a massive human being and being a really good SEC football player, well, those 2 things are mutually exclusive. You gotta figure a lot of things out because in high school, most of the time, those guys, and I think the example that sticks out in my head is Alex Barron at Orangeburg Wilkinson back in the day, a couple of decades ago, I guess, at this point, close to it. Just so massive. And obviously has gone on to a fine career, Florida State, and then in the NFL for a bunch of years. I think he's finally out of the league, but he was just so big, you didn't have to do a whole lot. I mean, it wasn't about technique or leverage necessarily. It was about, hey, big fella, you just get in the way of those guys. And nature can take care of the rest. But that's not the case when you're on the line on the offense or defensive side of the ball in the SEC, where you have other massive human beings on the other side who are going to be older, more experienced than a true freshman out of high school. So Cam Smith, kind of a rare example to me of a guy on the outside, defensive back specifically, who has developed now into an All-American type guy, a preseason All-American at least. We'll see what happens this year for the Gamecocks, but the stock is very high. The numbers were very good. Yeah, Craig mentions there's a guy at Fort Dorchester right now, down near Charleston, and he's listed at more than 7 foot and 400 pounds. That one is almost too big for football. I don't know if we've ever even heard of that. The height, especially, man, it just makes me immediately worried about the knee from the football perspective. The line perspective, that's just a lot of damage, a lot of a massive target, right? The thigh to mid shin area, knee type area, that is a massive target when you're that. was mentioning Shane Beamer's got to figure out, and every college coach does right now. But what Shane's got to figure out for the Gamecocks is, all right, how many resources do you commit to guys who you think are going to be really good SEC players eventually? And then how many do you have to go to? I'll call them, in baseball, they're called JUCO bandits. And JUCO bandits is how Ray Tanner helped make South Carolina a national power. A lot of guys in California, Florida, coming in as juniors, would play 2 years at Carolina, but they were coming in, and either they were going to be an important contributor or they were not going to be on part of the program. And that was it. And it's one of the reasons why college baseball rules changed about the roster size and the way that you can offer scholarships and the whole thing, because there were just so many guys coming in that I think it was deemed by other programs and college baseball in general to not be how they wanted the sport to be set up. But Ray Tanner and company were using the environment that was college baseball certainly to their advantage and help South Carolina become a power. So now with Spencer Rattler coming in, Austin Stockner coming in from Oklahoma, Rattler being the headline guy, and clearly something that South Carolina hasn't had. One of the most highly sought after quarterbacks in the country out of high school coming to Carolina. We've had some big time quarterbacks come. Don't get me wrong. Dylan Lonergan is the latest in line to possibly be a highly coveted high school quarterback to come to Carolina. He's got it down to the Gamecocks and Stanford, it looks like, maybe Alabama. His commitment date has been set for July 5th. But how many of those guys from high school do you want? I would think the way you break it down right now philosophically is out of a class of 25, and then that's the thing too, right? How long does that last? That limit last? Doesn't appear like it's going to be lasting too much longer. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, right now, that's what it is. So let's go with that. At a class of 25, I think you got 10 would probably be about the most you could take out of that class of guys that you don't feel like you can count on to be solid contributors immediately the next season. But they can develop into really good players. Melvin Ingram, probably the best example of that from the South Carolina perspective. Guy who couldn't really find a position, fullback, linebacker, and obviously hopped in on the defensive line and has made a ton of money since then. All-American season and fake punt against Georgia and the whole thing that was Melvin Ingram's evolution. He's a shining example of someone that just took a little bit to develop, had to put in years and a bit under the radar, not necessarily 4-star, 5-star guy. But that was a different era of football now without the transfer portal available to you, where you get in a guy like Antoine Wells from James Madison, get in a guy like Corey Rucker from Arkansas State, who have produced at wide receiver, both of those guys at their schools in college, and now are being counted on to help take the offense, the wide receiving core up to the next level, or certainly to be much more productive than they were in 2021. But you get to count on that immediately. You've seen those guys do it in college. Maybe not quite at the same level, but pretty close. And so I would think 10 is the number of, for lack of a better word, projects. Projectable guys. And then I think you got to leave most of that class, the majority of that class, open to guys who can contribute next year. What was it? 7 guys coming in the transfer portal this year for the Gamecock, something like that. Like maybe it's that national ranking of 7th that's sticking out to me. So it might be more than that. But obviously Spencer Rattler leading the way. But with where the transfer portal is right now, what name, image, likeness is right now, until it changes, I think you gotta count on using that to your advantage as much as possible. And South Carolina, I think, has just as much a chance to use that to their advantage as nearly anyone out there. Now, I get it. Maybe if you're Southern Cal and you go pay the Volitnikoff Award winner Jordan Addison a ridiculous amount of money and offer LA stuff, probably a little bit more than South Carolina and Columbia can offer out there, can be a dangling carrot. Let's be realistic, right? But when you're talking about an SEC school with tremendous facilities and an instant platform to become a national name, that's what you can become in South Carolina. Maybe it'll take a little bit more at the Gamecock program than it would at a more tradition-rich program, but I think what Shane is probably selling is the opposite, right? But I read a quote, I think it was from Dylan Lonergan, talking about his recent visit, saying that, yeah, all they're missing is players at South Carolina. That seems to be the sales pitch right now, right? Steve Spurrier's was come to South Carolina to do something that's never been done before. And you can go somewhere else, but then you're just going to be the next in line kind of guy. You're just going to be continuing what's already there, as opposed to South Carolina go win a championship for the first time. Shane Beamer's not selling that exactly, but it sounds to me like he's selling something similar, where you will be valued that much more, I think, by the entire program, the environment, the fan base for sure, if you can help elevate the program at least back to where it was in the heydays under Steve Spurrier and top 10 team. If you can get to a championship level team that's never been done before, wow. Miss Craig's note here on the YouTube live stream. I think Matthew Fitzpatrick's caddy had gone 40 years without a major. That got me a little bit seeing his emotion. Yeah. So maybe that's exactly why their dynamic was all kind of switched. Fitzpatrick being a relatively young guy, more experience for the caddy, coming up a little bit short in those majors. That was to me, that entire scene there on the 72nd hole, the shot of Zalatoris missing the putt with the family celebrating in the background in real time, and then the shot of the caddy dropping the hat and just kind of bursting out into joyous tears of joy immediately. Fitzpatrick being there, right there with him, almost like, yeah, we did it, man. Even though Fitzpatrick did it. That dynamic is always going to be hilarious to me. And I probably devalue it. I don't value it enough. I mean, Bones McKay is right there. Is he on the bag with Scheffler now? Is that the deal? Can't ignore that he won a bunch with Phil Mickelson and then is now doing something pretty similar with Scotty Scheffler. So there's clearly a high value in a good caddy on the PGA Tour or golf's highest level. But still, they're carrying around a golf bag and handing guys sticks. What Jack Nicklaus used to say, the best quality in a caddy is knowing to shut up. Pretty sure that's a Nicklaus line. Shut up, show up, and I forget what the other one is. So it can be a little overvalued for sure, but it just seemed like such a human moment there of emotion in that way. And on the other side, Justin Thomas, thank you, Craig, for correcting me there, not Scotty Scheffler, who Bones McKay's with. Keep up. All right, I'll keep up. But that genuine joy to see from those guys, the family, and then the genuine frustration to see as well from Grayson Murray specifically, and then being unapologetic for it. He's like, nah, it's frustrating. U.S. Open's tough, man. I'm not apologizing for throwing my putter, breaking the club. Good for him for not being fake about it. And then the one with me, Roy McIlroy was so good this weekend, and yet his pound in the sand when he hits one out of the rough into the sand, just so bitterly frustrated. So I understand why the U.S. Open might be at the top of your list of golf watches. You don't get that at Augusta National, right? The Green Jackets, I don't think, would take very kindly to the grounds at Augusta National being sullied by a buttered tomahawk chop, but it's just different. And that to me is what makes golf fun for sure. That's why I like the way it's set up, that you get the one major every single year, same spot, tradition, immaculate grounds, everything that Augusta National is. And then you get to see other stuff. And the way that they've moved it up with PGA Championship being number 2 there, you don't have to wait as long as you used to in between majors. US Open being so brutal, then the British Open usually having so many weather elements involved. This year was PGA out in Tulsa. It was cold. I noticed it was pretty chilly. Scheffler and I think most of the golfers were going long sleeves with pants. It looked like everybody in the gallery was as well. So to me, to get those just different type of elements is fun to follow, as well as the emotion this weekend. The rare, I feel like the pros do it pretty good. Now, some do it better than others, right? And then you get the reputation of being Bryson DeChambeau or Patrick Reed-ish and not easy to like, not handling the frustration very well. But also, how they aren't necessarily honest with it afterwards. I think that's what really makes me pull against a guy or not pull for a guy, might be the better way to put it. And Grayson Murray wasn't that guy. He's like, yep, that's who I am. U.S. Open stuff. I'm not going to apologize for doing that. I think we can all respect that in so many ways. Gene weighing in on the YouTube live stream. Good morning, Gene. Says, my most emotional sports moment by far will now forever be watching the North Greenville Crusaders win it all in Cary. Seeing all the emotions of our boys and coaches on the field after the win was priceless. And to do it at a place like North Greenville, where they never even made the College World Series before, and then cruising through the College World Series to the national championship, pretty cool deal for sure. And also to hear Landon Powell, and we'll let you hear a little bit more from him in just a second, just about how far the program had come, the specific challenges that his recruiting pitch includes at North Greenville Conservative Bible College, where you got to go to chapel twice a week and the whole thing. And knowing how close they had become and how he talked about his program, a lot like Ray Tanner talked about his around 2010, saying, yeah, I don't think this is my best team or most talented team, I think is the exact way to put it. But they are the best because they win the most. And that's what happened at North Greenville in Division II level in the College World Series National Championship. Thanks, Gene, for sharing your experience on that. And then the obvious question became, or maybe still becomes, right, what happens with Landon Powell's coaching career, the former Gamecock, former big leaguer, especially knowing the Gamecock struggles here recently. Now seeing Clemson go out and get Michigan coach Eric Backich, who took Michigan to a national championship series. Listening to Landon talk about his perspective on coaching and the Gamecocks, his relationship with the program and the whole thing was really interesting. This happened, it was just a week ago? I think it was just a week ago, yeah. The celebration was on, and Landon, kind enough to join us via Trey Dyson's on the scene reporting. So let you hear a little bit of that. Be right back here with Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent.
I love Tigerville.
this town of Greenville. My wife grew up here, born and raised. Her family lives here. Our nieces and nephews are here in town. This has become a home for us. Like going to church yesterday, sitting in church. We did my daughter's funeral in that church. The guy that was leading worship is a really close friend of mine. And, our Bible study group was all there around us. And it's like, man, why would I want to, why am I like in a hurry to get out of this? This is a great season of life right now. And so, I'm not chasing any other jobs. I'm happy where my feet are. But I've told these recruits and I've told these guys in my office, there's 4 players in my office right now listening to me talk. I've told them from day one, like a job that I would take would be the University of South Carolina. There's no secret about that. That's my alma mater. I was shaped into the person I am at that university. I love that fan base. That is a place that I would go. But I'm not in a hurry to do it. I'm not, they got a coach there now. I believe in him. I have his back. And I mean that. Like, I know there's a lot of people that don't have his back and that are questioning what's going on there right now. I'm not one of those people. I want them to be better. Am I, as a Gamecock, satisfied with what they're doing there? No, it's not. Right now, it's not good enough. But he knows that too. I promise you. And he wants to get it better. I know he does. And I have his back. I believe in him. I think he's the guy that can turn it around and get him on track. So, I by no means, I'm a Mark Kingston fan. I'm rooting for him. I hope he gets it done. But, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, who knows what the future holds. Maybe that job is available. And, maybe I get a phone call or maybe I don't. I don't know, but I can't control that.
I had to ask him there who actually just called him. Hilarious timing on that thing. And you can watch more from that Landon Powell episode. Everything always gets archived immediately on the YouTube page, but it's up on the podcast platforms as well, the audio version. And again, that was a week ago today. North Greenville celebrating. I guess it was Friday. They had won it. So that was the exit interview day. That is usually the worst day in college baseball for coaches. But when you win a national championship, a little bit different. The honesty there from Landon Powell, I think, a little bit different. But his background is so much different than many other college coaches across the board. But baseball, specifically in the state of South Carolina, is a different spot for him to be in, and how it continues to evolve be something to keep an eye on for sure. But now it's the College World Series going down, and it's Oklahoma who is in the driver's seat after beating Notre Dame last night, winning their first game against Arkansas, I believe it was. No, that's not right. That was the other side of the bracket, where Arkansas and Ole Miss in the winner's bracket game tonight. 7 o'clock is that ball game on, I believe, ESPN2. The elimination games this afternoon on that side of the bracket as well, with where you got 3 out of the 4 teams from the SEC West. You got Stanford taking on Auburn at 2 o'clock today. And the loser of that one will be the first one to go 2 in Q and be eliminated on that side. It's Texas, eliminated by Texas A&M. So it was Texas A&M I'm talking about with the Oklahoma first game. And then Notre Dame last night. Notre Dame helping to eliminate Texas. A&M sending them home, adding a little bit more fuel to that Texas rivalry. Not that it needs a bunch, but and we're back in. Sorry if you dropped out there technically wise. Sometimes it pops right out. I was talking College World Series and what's on tap today. A couple of games, 2 and 7, the typical schedule. 2 o'clock elimination game, Auburn and Stanford. 7 o'clock winners bracket game, Ole Miss and Arkansas, winner of that one, like Oklahoma on the other side of the bracket in the driver's seat there, and just one win away from the College World Series National Championship Series, which turns into a best of 3. The Oklahoma Notre Dame game last night, a couple of crazy instances. The first play of the game, first out of the game, first baseman from Oklahoma, head over heels in the dugout. Fantastic play. A little later in the game, play at third base. The slide kicks the ball out of the glove, which immediately hits the third base coach for Oklahoma. Oklahoma runner never sees it. Notre Dame guy goes over, picks the ball up, just tags the guy out who's just kind of walking around, thought he was out. Then Notre Dame hits a home run out in the bullpen, the Oklahoma bullpen, and one Oklahoma pitcher was taking relief in a different way, opening the door to get back in the dugout, and boom, there's the ball bounced right at him. Crazy. But the name brands involved, the different styles involved, Oklahoma doing it younger, maybe more aggressive on the base paths. I mean, they certainly have power in the whole thing, so let's not oversimplify it and say they're doing it in ways that have never been done before and so much different than everybody else in college baseball. Now but they are a little bit different, and the fact that they're doing it with such young guys is the really impressive part. Now, it's one of those things where sometimes it's better to be less knowledgeable about your situation. You don't want guys to necessarily know exactly what they're doing at that level. I've felt that out of the College World Series before. That 2010 team for the Gamecocks, one bad strike call away from going 2-Q to Oklahoma with Jackie Bradley Jr. at the plate back in the day. And fortunately for Carolina, that one called a ball on the inside. And never forget Jackie Bradley being asked about that thing. It's like, how do you take that pitch in that moment? And classic Jackie Bradley Jr. response, like, it was a ball. Like, it seemed so simple to him. It was that cut and dry. Very, very easy for him to take that one in his world. For those of us watching on the outside, it was wow. But then came through with a hit. The Gamecocks go on the legendary run of 22 straight wins, whatever it was, in the NCAA tournament. That went all the way into 2012 and that national championship series. But Oklahoma now just one win away. And to have them and Texas coming to the SEC, you had the 4 SEC West schools that are in it, and then 2 of them playing tonight in the winner's bracket. The other one playing Stanford in the elimination game, and Auburn. It's Ole Miss and Arkansas. It's worth watching, but I think it's also kind of a painful reminder for Gamecock fans of unfortunately not being there and not having been there now for a decade. And how long that feels in the college baseball world. I don't know about you guys, but it felt long in just the 6-year drought between 2004 and 2010 back in the day. And there was certainly a loud portion of Gamecock fans who weren't pleased with Ray Tanner not getting back there for 5 years, even though he'd been there for 3 years in a row in 2, 3, and 4. And so now 10 years removed, but coming off and even saying the sentence out loud is my brain want to stop me kind of thing. Coming off a less than 500 year and missing the NCAA tournament for the second time in the Mark Kingston era. Missing the tournament. Something that was unimaginable during that stretch. Just the program was set up to host regionals and super regionals and set themselves up then in the postseason. That was always the line. And I think that's what you have to take in a sport like baseball where crazy things happen. And teams get hot at the right times, and really it's never the best team that wins. In a sport since 1999 was the last time the number 1 overall seed in a tournament won the tournament. You got to take the attitude of you just got to put yourself in position. And the fact that Carolina hasn't been in that position in a long time. They had the regional in Columbia, not this past season, but the year before, but they weren't the number one seed there. It just worked out, fortunately for them, but they didn't make it to the final game in that one. Eliminated by Virginia. Old Dominion going on to not win that one either. And Virginia kind of getting on a bit of a underdog run to the College World Series last year. But that's what you can't count on as a college baseball program. And that's what you can't be when you're the University of South Carolina and you won a couple of national championships and you played for a third one in a row a decade ago. So how the Gamecock baseball program gets back, that's a tough one, man. Because again, I like to make sure to have the proper perspective here, even though we are coming at it from the South Carolina perspective. It is good to acknowledge, I think, Arizona State, a very tradition-rich program that is not anywhere near where it used to be. Didn't make the NCAA tournament this year. Southern Cal, another one. Wichita State was a really good college baseball program that's kind of fallen off the map as well. Appreciate your patience as I battle through some sniffles this morning, coming off the big coach pitch all-star weekend up in Greenville for my 7-year-old and seeing a lot of familiar faces and seeing baseball this time of year with the postseason environment. Even on that small level, man, so fun. So fun. And really good to see the different communities. It was from all over the state, right? Barrier Island and Somerville from down in the low country. At Northwood program right outside of Greenville, another Greenville team involved easily. Greenwood, Abbeville was out there. Irmo, my little town of TGK. That was fun, man. Florence had a couple of teams there too. So from all over the state of South Carolina, at just that young age, 7 and 8-year-olds, all kinds of stuff. And again, I mentioned it earlier, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to paint the Norman Rockwell picture of baseball being America's pastime and everything being beautiful, perfect, utopian. Not that. Coach and parent issues, parent-player issues, umpire-parent, coach issues, all of those things, man. But overall, I think any father that went through yesterday and could be around their sons or their fathers, and then a lot of times that is what baseball is about specifically, because you get to spend so much time with someone watching it. I know my dad and I watched a ton of baseball and taught me how to keep score and coach my little league team and the whole thing, coach pitch team. So all of those things are combined with baseball more than other sports. I think basketball is so intense, and football is intense too, maybe in a different way. I think of maybe the tailgating scene more as the family connections, especially with Gamecock football, and that being a bit of a family tradition with me. But it's the game of baseball that's almost like the tailgating atmosphere, because it takes so long. It's so laid back. Food's always involved. Got to stay hydrated this time of year too. So that one, that's why it sticks out to me, I think, in my mind. And that's, again, part of the beauty of the College World Series experience. If you've never gone, I completely recommend it. Put it at the top of my bucket list, top of my list of big-time sporting events, even above other ones like Super Bowl, the College Football National Championship. It's just a unique environment that I think you can't fully appreciate unless you're there. And having been at Rosenblatt Stadium back in the day before they made the switch, and then in 2010, the last year there, the first year of TD Ameritrade, seeing Omaha kind of take it to the next level, if you will, the stadium experience. And I think a lot of the Omaha natives, too, maybe it's just human nature to say, I kind of like the old one better. Even though it didn't have the amenities that the new one does. Yeah, there was nostalgia attached to it, and something pure about the old place, even though it wasn't sparkly and shiny. Maybe just so many years of tradition and history involved. I think it was named after a former Omaha mayor, Rosenblatt. Got a hey from Holly weighing in. Hey to you as well. Thanks for checking us out, especially the new time today. Going to move forward 8 to 10 and get this thing started a little bit earlier than usual. My 2-year-old tearing things up around my house might have something to do with that. But also, love the morning sports talk environment because we're still processing a lot of things sometimes after a big night. And then when we're talking about June in South Carolina, well, we got plenty of space to talk about college football upcoming, right? And not quite getting to the place where the spectacle that is media days is upon us. But definitely with plenty of news to talk about with the recruiting wrinkles going on. Latest one from the Gamecock perspective. And again, you're just joining us. Sorry for the pauses there. Trying to hit the mute and take care of the sniffles. But up to 8 commits for Carolina football. An athlete, I guess technically an athlete is how he is labeled. The most recent one, Cameron Sandlin from Anniston, Alabama. You know, you get put in a quarterback, a wide receiver, a running back. And then if you play a bunch of those positions, play defense as well, a lot of times in high school, and you're not quite, maybe there's no consensus out there about what you're going to play in the next level. You just get slapped with the athlete title. I think Kenny McKinley might have had that one back in the day, playing a bunch of quarterback in high school and going on to become one of the best wide receivers in South Carolina history. I mentioned Jarrell Adams a little earlier. I think he was, because he was so big, maybe got slapped with that tight end label early on, but that's what the latest commit for Carolina has as well. Projected to play tight end is where Cameron Sandlin is out of the state of Alabama, even though he's playing quarterback at his high school. But makes it 8 commits for Carolina. They're up to 31 in the country, or at number 31 in the country, I should say, from the consensus team rankings across the country from on3.com. July 5th is a date that a lot of Carolina fans will have circled to see kind of the next step if the Gamecocks can get a big-time quarterback prospect in Dylan Lonergan from the state of Georgia, who has it narrowed down to the Gamecocks in Stanford. Alabama also in the mix there. So if that domino drops, will be also interesting to keep an eye on maybe some other players who might be attached in some way to a big time quarterback commit to a class. It's always interesting to see how individual classes work, and it appears like Shane Beamer had an excellent recruiting weekend. I think it was not this past weekend, maybe the one before, where several guys committed on Sunday. They didn't necessarily make those commitments public that day, but it looks like there are a handful of guys at least that kind of looked at each other, were all in together and said, yeah, let's do this. I'm in, you in. Okay, all right. And then the question came up a little bit earlier of, all right, how many guys in 2022 now, with the transfer portal being what it is, Spencer Rattler headlining that for the Gamecocks, a great example of, I don't think there's a ceiling. I mean, if you had told me this time last year that Spencer Rattler was going to be the quarterback for the Gamecocks in a year, I would have told you you're nuts. It doesn't make any sense at all. That you're overblowing a former coach coaching as an assistant coach at his previous stop and the relationship he might have with a player, but obviously I would have been totally wrong. So I'm saying that is my example, shining example that Gamecock football has a chance to be a major player in the transfer portal moving forward. Already is a major player in the transfer portal moving forward and has a chance to maybe make that a large part of its identity. That will come with the balancing act of how you approach recruiting, the traditional recruiting, getting high school guys, and how patient you can be with developing them and them becoming more of the true identity and the foundation of your program, or the mixing and the matching process. Baseball guys have dealt with that forever with the 11.7 scholarships and the flux that sport has always had, and now it's more than ever. And Stuart Lake did a great job of telling us about how name, image, and likeness now has thrown an extra loop into that, as well as the Major League Baseball draft being pushed back to July, how much more difficult it is for the baseball perspective. I think football is dealing with it just at a different level, right? They don't have to worry about full scholarships, and they just have to worry about more guys. I mean, it's 25 guys per class, and then that might go away, and you might just be able to fill it in. So how much are you going to dedicate to one high school player, a high school prospect that doesn't project as an immediate contributor the next year, but may end up being an All-American in 3 years? That's the tricky part that all college football programs are dealing with right now. Gene wants to give a shout out to the Crusader Club up there in North Greenville for setting up a couple of tailgates for the families during the College World Series. First game in the championship game. Great for the families to get together. That kind of goes along with the College World Series experience that I had or saw, and why I think it's so special, because you have 8 fan bases out there. And I know 8 teams went to the Division II College World Series at a slightly different scale, right? But to see the 8 fan bases, and if you're a college baseball fan traveling with your university, you're really into it. So these people really love either that specific team and team members, because they're probably related to them, or they just really, really love their school, and they're the ultra fan. And to see 8 groups of those come together, and then the different ways, right? Because the ones that I went to, LSU was at maybe every single year. They had a massive impact, a massive contingent there. I think Texas is that as well. Texas was at the first one I went to. That was the 03 year that I went. They were coming off the national championship that they won against the Gamecocks in 02, I believe. But how that one is just almost like a family reunion, or just a yearly trip that they start planning around. And then some LSU fans just do it every year, or at least they did. And they count on it, whether their team's there or not. I know some Gamecock fans have done that too. And the further you get removed from that run back in the day, does 2 things for me. Makes me appreciate how special that run was, and yet maybe miss it that much more on the other side, and wonder how much it will take, what it will take for the Gamecocks to get back there. Hey, really appreciate you guys hopping in on a new time slot here from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you're listening later, whether you're catching up with a video podcast on YouTube or the Facebook automatic archives, Twitter, automatically there as well. The Tim Hill UFA is the account, or you're listening on one of the audio podcast platforms. Really appreciate you checking out the show. If you can subscribe, like, comment, all that stuff, that would be greatly appreciated. Spread the word to any and everyone, so we can grow this thing as much as possible as we still continue to figure out exactly what is Tim Hill unrestricted free agent, other than being able to talk some sports and what the most important sports topics are in the state of South Carolina each and every day. Now, 8 to 10 a.m., streaming live every single day. And again, thank you for being a part of the show. That'll do it for the Monday edition on June 20th. Going to have Scott Eisberg alongside from down in Charleston. I know tomorrow, who knows who else will join us this week. We'll get some football discussion going, I know, and that's the fun part about June. Who knows what exactly else we'll get into, but we'll be here to help you through your day, no matter what you're doing, and we'll try to have some fun while we're doing it. Thanks for checking out Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent, first early edition on June 20th, 2022.